All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another governance and risk call here at MakerDAO. Today is the 219th one. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of the governance facilitators here, joined by a bunch of awesome people that contribute to the Maker protocol or are otherwise interested in what we got going on. This is our weekly call where we go over all things governance and risk, kind of talk about what's happening in the protocol and things we should be monitoring. If you're joining us live, welcome. This happens to be like our last official scheduled governance and risk call for 2022. So it's a pleasure that you're spending it here with us, and appreciate the folks watching on the recording as well. Before we get into things, we do have a few ground rules to go over. Obviously, this is being recorded, so let's try to be mindful about talking over each other. There are a couple tools you can use to kind of help that. We have a raise hand feature on Zoom. You'll find that under reactions. If you'd like to join the kind of virtual speakers list, that's a great way to do it. If you're unable or otherwise unwilling to hop on the mic, you can always drop your comment or question in chat. Be happy to read it off. If you're into having cameras on, we always appreciate that. So take a moment if you can pop on those cameras. It's always nice to see all the wonderful people joining us today. One thing you can help me out with is introducing yourself when you speak. I try to remember, but I do sometimes forget. So helps the recording, helps everyone on the call who may not know you. If you hop on the mic, it's always nice to start with a quick intro of who you are. And that pretty much does it. This is an open call, so we do really want to encourage you to ask questions, leave comments, engage with us. That's why we host it every week. So appreciate all y'all that showed up. Last thing is just DBAA. We're a wonderful community here, joined from all over the world, and be nice. We'll get along fine. Cool. So I mentioned agenda earlier. Let's briefly go over that. We'll start as usual with our governance roundup featuring the votes, what's going on in the land of Maker improvement proposals and on the Maker forum. We do have an initiative update today, hearing about the Maker transactional level accounting dashboard. So that'll be neat. And then finally, we'll be closing off 2022 with a discussion about ideal real-world assets tracking and some of the ways Maker could do that better. All right, let's hop into the governance side. Going to be a fairly busy page, end of the year, all those fun things to consider. So we had a number of polls conclude. Most of them passed. We had the change of the ambassadors program multisig that passed. We had an election for the DAI Foundation board member. That winner overwhelmingly was Damon Law, that user. Congratulations. We had side stream auctions as well as governance communications do a funding request, basically for utilizing their budget funds. Both were passed. And finally, we did have a SPF, a special purpose fund, about using some risk modeling that was rejected. In executive land, our last planned executive of the year has been passed and executed. That was a massive one. You can read some of the things that are in there. Take a look. There's been a number of tweets about it as well. Definitely some exciting elements there to end the year on. Note that we aren't planning on having another executive until January 11th, 2023. Obviously, that could change with emergency circumstances, something urgent comes along. But at the moment, you know, as much as we do, which is that we're not planning to have one until January 11th. All right, that's enough talking from me. I believe I'm going to hand over the mic to one of our MIP editors, Gala, to take us through the land of MIPs.
Hello, thank you, Peyton. This is Gala. So yes, let's start with the MIPs. For the short ratification polls results, so the 50,000 special purpose fund request for a DeFi-focused language data set went on chain on Monday for a short ratification poll, that's 3 days. The proposal did not pass. Next, we can check our proposals in RFC. We have quite a few active proposals, as you may know, under the RFC subcategory in the forum. So let's check them out as quickly as possible. Yeah, the first slide, the top level MIPs, if you can go one, yeah. So we have MIP 90, onboarding a real-world asset both to acquire USDC and then purchase structured credit or money market funds. Next, MIP 91 introduces the concept of a defender contract against governance attacks. MIP 92 onboards USDC from the PSM to yearn for yield. And MIP 93 proposes utilizing the 𝘧𝘪𝘯𝘫 protocol. So the 𝘧𝘪𝘯 protocol allows for real-time on-chain verifiable roles to be maintained throughout the Maker protocol. Next, we have a few amendments and removals. So we have proposals to remove MIP 14, which establishes a generic mechanism for transferring DAI out of the protocol, to amend the recognized delegate compensation, to amend MIP 51 to remove calendar exceptions, to amend the interim facilitator onboarding process, to amend MIP 63, the Maker Keeper network, to remove a specific component in MIP 14 while keeping the rest of it, and to remove 2 obsolete domain framework MIPs. Next, for our special purpose funds and protocol DAI transfer requests, we have 3 special purpose funds. So a fund request to support strategic finance core unit expanded mandate. 1 to develop a proof of performance for the Viridian cluster. I believe this is one of our discussion topics today. And also 1 to create a self-insurance fund. As for the protocol DAI transfer requests, we have 1 that aims to fund tech ops core unit continuity through February until they can submit a new budget request in March. And the other aims to fund Immunify security core unit from December 2022 to May 2023. Next, as for the core unit framework proposals, we have core unit offboardings for CES and for comms. The latter has seen its budget rejected, and the offboarding is being proposed by its facilitator. We also have some proposals that are placeholders with no numbers assigned yet. Those are to offboard SAS and Immunify security core units. There's a budget request by Tech Ops, and finally a facilitator onboarding proposal for Nicolas Lohlik to lead SCS. 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝑗𝑗, I think I am sorry. So finally, for others, we have the onboarding of the Chainlink Keeper network, a proposal to use DSS Kiln to restart the burning of MKR, and a declaration of intent to develop a comprehensive on-chain monitoring solution for real-world vaults. This proposal will only be eligible to enter the February governance cycle at the earliest. So that's it for the MIPS update this week. Thank you very much.
Always appreciated, Gala. Obviously, a lot going on in the Maker forums, so even though a lot of us are going to be taking a holiday break, don't forget to check in from time to time and see what the latest is on those proposal edits. All right, that should take us to our forum recap.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's forum recap covering the week of December 8th to December 14th. And this past week on the forum, we saw a couple of announcements, we saw a couple of discussions going on, we also saw a handful of MIPs being proposed, and we saw at least 1 assessment posted. But without further ado, let me get into the announcements. First up, I'd like to welcome our newest recognized delegate, EPI Lab by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Now, they are the first educational institution from Asia to participate in Maker governance, and some of their goals are to establish a beneficial and friendly environment between universities and protocols, also to educate the next generation about the benefits of blockchain technology in traditional finance, and they want to support the protocol on treasury, budgeting, process streamlining, and collateral risk management, as well as many other things that are listed in their delegate platform. Now, yesterday, they presented their platform on the Meet Your Delegate call, which should be uploaded to YouTube later today, pretty soon, so keep an eye out for the notification so that you can watch that video. Next up, we have the Strategic Finance Core Unit, who analyzed Maker's protocol-level financial data to build a dual-entry ledger for on-chain accounting. Now, the ledger offers unique features such as real-time data, being able to independently verify and audit, and open-sourced categorization choices. Now, the team hopes that this initiative will bring us all closer towards developing a gold standard for DAOs. But you'll hear more about this very soon, as it's coming up next as part of this call's initiative right after I finish the forum recap. So I'll be moving on to our discussions, beginning with this post from recognized delegate PVL, who opens a discussion about the risk core unit's company, Block Analytica, and whether the current risk model used by the team is appropriate for the cost. Primož, along with others, stepped in to share their thoughts and defend the risk core unit's work. Many others offered their feedback in the comments as well. Now, this is definitely a very impassioned discussion, but I recommend to view both sides of the discussion when checking out this post before submitting some feedback. And last but not least, we have a technical assessment on 2 alternative implementations of MIP81 that has been published by the interim CES domain team. In the first alternative, MIP65 is implemented in a traditional custodial arrangement managed by a real-world arranger through resolutions approved by Maker governance. Now, the second alternative is to implement a safe box, which requires further development to comply with Coinbase's legal and regulatory requirements. In addition, the safe box implementation provides the added benefit of improving on-chain transparency and enabling transfers to be completed on-chain without involvement of any real-world asset counterparty. Institutional rewards will have to be validated off-chain in both implementations, so keep that in note. But this was just a quick overview of the assessment. Check out the entire post if you want to know more or have any questions and feedback. Now, over the week, we also saw several MIPs come in, as well as November's financial report. We have a quick summary of those in the forum recap post if you want to check it out. As usual, this recording will be up on the MakerDAO YouTube channel. But that's it for the forum recap video. The post has research, reports, proposals, initiatives, help wanted, all of that good stuff. And thank you. I will see you all next week. Even if we don't have a GNR call next week, I will still be posting the forum recap and the video.
Awesome. Much appreciated, Artem and crew. Looking forward to still have a video despite our off week. I have heard murmurs of a holiday edition GNR, so keep your eyes out if you are around next week. All right, that should take us to our initiative updates. And I believe we're going to be hearing about the transaction level accounting dashboard.
Hey guys, this is Lit from Strategic Finance, and yeah, I want to talk about the dual entry transaction level accounting ledger and the aggregated reports that we built on top of it. At some point, am I able to get screen share ability, or?
Yeah, I just made you co-host, so you can share your screen pretty much immediately if you'd like.
All right, awesome.
Appreciate the patience on the switchover. Looking forward to seeing what you got to present.
It's I'm facing a little bit of difficulties here. Not allowing me to share.
Oh, Are you getting any sort of error message? Is it a permissions thing?
It's a permissions thing, yeah.
Try here, one second. Let me remove and re-add your permissions.
I'll have to reopen Zoom.
No, I don't think you have to reopen it. Try again. Oh, I see. Raf is mentioning that if you have a Mac, then you have to reopen. Yeah, that might be what's happening.
Yeah, new macOS, not so new now, kind of security thing, and it's actually a pain in the ass.
Best to keep us safe,
All
right?
right. I will
Everything's
wait and reopen real quick.
Yeah, no worries. We're waiting on you.
Happy to do a little vamping in the downtime. Appreciate those of you that are here with us live. So wouldn't be a Maker GNR without one or two instances of technical difficulties. So glad we're keeping that going. Definitely have a lot of fun things to discuss today too. So would encourage people to start thinking about their questions to our later discussion topic on reward asset monitoring. Always nice when we can get a few more voices in there.
And we have Nick here.
Always nice.
I have some questions for Nick.
Hey, Lit.
All
If you still, oh, there it is. Never mind. Take it back.
Awesome. Perfect. Sorry about that. As I mentioned, this is we have built a dual entry transaction level accounting ledger and built a few aggregated reports on top of this. And as a result, each of these reports is auditable down to the transaction level and can be cross-checked independently for consistency and correctness, for the highest level of transparency. And further along that train of thought, the data that feeds these reports comes from an open source Dune query. So the same can be said about that query itself. It can also be cross-checked for correctness at any point in time. So I'll talk a little bit about the methodology. We have built a data set of over 2 million rows that includes all transactions since the start of MCD. And this also includes things as simple as interest accruals. I think a lot of the transactions in here are just simple on-chain interest accruals, actually. So some of the time, this is one thing to kind of point out, when you dig into an individual transaction and click into the Etherscan link, it might look like nothing's happening, but in the logs, actually, the interest is accruing on chain, and that's what we're representing in that transaction. So each transaction is categorized into 2 matching accounts according to a chart of accounts that you can find in the forum post. You can also see the same chart of accounts by expanding the categories in this balance sheet report. For example, like here, these this is like one account drilled down to the deepest level. And we would actually love feedback and input on our choice of accounts so that we can iterate on and improve them. That's one of the areas we would love feedback in, along with anything else that you guys come up with. I'll talk quickly about the data flow and point out one of the things that Artem said was actually a little bit false. So the data goes from the open source Dune query to a Snowflake instance that we host. and then from that to Power BI. It's not real time right now. And we are actually limited by the frequency of Power BI data refreshes. At best, we can do daily right now. Currently, this is not automated yet. To automate, actually, one of the bottlenecks is that we need Dune API access. So we'll have that probably within the next few days, and we'll automate this probably starting at a weekly cadence, maybe eventually going to daily. And then the real time is still, that's like the gold standard that we will strive to eventually get toward. One of the ways to do that is if Dune kind of enabled the same functionality that we're showing within Power BI here. It's something that they have partly done in the past. They've had pivot tables, maybe a little simpler pivot tables. But regardless, they've done it in the past. And I think eventually we'll be able to convince them to add this functionality there, because it would be strong for them as well. I'll also talk about just the planned short-term or shorter-term future improvements that we have. And one of them is to add teleport revenue as that starts to come in. Another, similarly, adding revenue from yielding PSMs as it starts to accrue on chain. The best example of that is GUSD. I believe they have not made their first payment yet. And once they do, we'll classify those transactions in our query automatically and capture those going on. Another planned improvement is to account for MKR token rewards as an expense. And the plan for this is in the forum post itself, if you want to read more about that. Finally, we want to have display token functionality. This is also elaborated in the forum post, but basically it would allow us to have the output reports to be displayed in the values of other tokens rather than mostly just DAI. And it would also allow to consolidate the value of other tokens. So one thing to point out in this balance sheet report here is that it only includes DAI transactions. We do have another type of transaction that is important in the Maker treasury, basically, and that is not, these are found on the second page, basically just representing the accrual of non-DAI assets into our treasury, which today includes Aave, Compound, ENS, and staked Aave. And yeah, with the display token functionality, we'd actually be able to consolidate the value of all of those into one unified report, which we can't do today yet. And then I will talk a little bit more about this particular report. It's a balance sheet report, shows assets, liabilities, and equity broken down into various levels of aggregation according to our chart of accounts. And one small note here is that traditionally in accounting, equity and liabilities are made to be negative, which makes the accounting check easier, because then, at any point for assets should equal liabilities plus equity. But we have chosen to not follow this convention, as I think the results are less intuitive in our eyes. For example, it would show negative revenues when they're meant to be positive, and when an end user digs down to the transaction level, sorting out what's supposed to be negative and what's supposed to be positive is, it's not. This is just. Can y'all still hear me?
Oh, hey, Lit, your mic, something happened with it.
Yeah, my AirPods.
There you are.
I figured that happened. Yeah, I don't know. Cool. So as I was saying, we have chosen not to follow the accounting convention, as the results are slightly less intuitive. It would show like negative revenues, for instance, and when an end user would dig into the specific transactions, we don't want to have to expect them to kind of wrangle what's supposed to be negative, what's supposed to be positive, and all that. I think the output overall at the transaction level is much more intuitive this way. And so I kind of have already demoed this, but I'll demo some of the drill down functionalities within this sheet. I will actually choose a specific area as well, because there is one transaction that we have had to manually enter that does not have a hash associated with it. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so we see that yielding stablecoin has only started to have a balance in 2022. Let's dig into 2022. So we can see here that between October and November, the non-yielding PSM balance went down by about $1 billion. $500 million went to yielding balance, and then another half is just probably lost demand. But let's say we wanted to know more. So can drill through to the full table. And this now shows every single transaction that makes up that cell, with Etherscan links to all of them, besides the one at the very top that I was alluding to already. And so we needed to do this because the GUSD PSM between October and November shifted from non-yielding to yielding. So basically we needed to kind of have that represented in the data, and move the entire balance accrued in that PSM up to that point from the non-yielding category to the yielding category. So that description is kind of here in this like replacement of a transaction hash. And in this category, we have this negative 222 million number. And then in the yielding stablecoin category, we have, you know, the opposite, a positive this number. I wanted to specifically mention that because it's a very unique type of transaction. It's the only one that doesn't have a hash. There's a section within the Dune query that is meant to capture, if we ever have to do this again, all of the transactions will be in that specific section, so that it will be very easy for users to look at all those at the same time. But if any of y'all have any feedback on how to better handle this specific situation, our ears are open.
Right on. Really appreciate that demo and presentation.
Sure. And there's one more part of it. And this is the second report that we've made. It is basically an income statement, but it encapsulates a little bit more. It is a statement of changes in protocol surplus, which is similar to the previous view, built from the same data, but it is not cumulative and only shows the items which change the protocol surplus. So there's two broad categories, which is, you know, income. So this portion is basically just an income statement. And then there's also a statement of changes in token holdings, which represents MKR token mints and burns. And similarly, it can be broken down to a month level and then drilled down through to the specific transactions. And that concludes my demo. If anyone has any questions or feedback, I will be happy to take them now or in the forum post itself.
Right on. I know one thing I was wondering if you had kind of like a ideal user or like, basically like, what did you imagine this mostly being used for? And like, is there any opportunity there for people in the community to poke around and look for things?
So this, I think the way we envision it is that any kind of user that used our monthly financial reports, this is basically another version of those that allows for greater transparency. So it reports all of the same, mostly all of the same numbers that are pertinent, but also allows, if anything piques anybody's interest, they can specifically dig into that section as much as they want to.
Hey, Lit, thanks for putting this together. It's Frank here, flip-flop-flap delegate. The indirect expenses there, how are you calculating that? Are you subtracting the direct costs? And does that include things like MIP 55s that are approved?
So MIP 55s, can you remind me what makes up those?
Special purpose fund.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, those will all flow into the workforce expenses category. Yeah, basically. And then that's broken down to actual expenses and returned expenses. And that's actually brings me to another important point. In the past, in some of our financial reporting, we have only counted an expense once it was spent out of the core unit wallet. So let's say the RWF core unit draws 3 million, spends 1 million, and still has 2 million left. We would count 1 million of expenses in some of our previous reporting. In this report, since we do it all at the hash level, as soon as that 3 million is drawn, we count it as an expense. If it ever comes back, we count it as a return. But in the meantime, it's gone, or it's considered to be gone. Yeah.
Lit, is there one like finding or metric that you were most surprised about when building this and putting it together?
Honestly, yes. That would be or actually, wait, was it on that page? Yeah, let me drill up. This line actually right here. So I kind of came and joined after the whole burn phase of MKR. And we can see on an aggregate basis, basically 50.5 million DAI was used to burn MKR, which, if you compare that to the overall surplus of 75 million today, that's pretty significant. It's a lot higher than I expected.
Definitely some great questions, and thanks for the responses. Give one final call here in case anyone did want to ask anything else. Otherwise, we'll move on to our discussion segment. All right. Well,
thank you all.
Yeah, huge thanks, Lit and Strategic Finance, for coming on and making that presentation for us. All right, awesome. That should take us into our discussion segment. And today we're talking about ideal real-world asset monitoring and real-world asset management approach. Not sure if we had anyone to kick this one off, David.
Yeah, it's me. I'll do a quick intro about kind of the state of things, the concerns that I've seen surfaced on the forums, And then we're going to open it up to just discussion and Q&A. I have a small handful of questions that I put up, but mostly interested in what the crowd here today is curious about. So yeah, so currently we have a few arrangers and several live real-world asset deals. We have partial and fragmented monitoring of deals. The best example of monitoring, I would say, is probably like Sebastian's MIP65 dashboard on Dune. So, you know, other projects report but don't have like a really great way to illustrate everything. We have two emerging real-world asset management groups, aka protector sub-DAOs. We have, and to remind the crowd, protector sub-DAOs will be in the end game responsible for the real-world asset side of the portfolio. We also have strategic finance core unit that has recently hired a new person dedicated to tracking real-world assets, among other things. Yeah, as Juan points out in the chat, currently they're clusters, but my understanding is they both intend to become their own independent sub-DAOs. And then we also have at least one delegate pushing for a high quality solution in the recent declaration of intent posted by Raphael from Flipside Crypto, with obviously other delegates totally in support of the initiative.
Team Black is supporting the initiative.
Nice.
And drafted the proposal with me.
Cool. Yeah, credit to Tim. Awesome. And so some of the concerns that have been raised about real-world assets were regarding conflicts of interest, self-dealing, who bears the overhead, the creditor or maker, the integrity of data and the need for third-party auditing, as well as lack of clear expectations relating to asset class nuances. Tracking of real-world assets, you know, varies depending on the real-world asset. And so those have been like the major themes that I've seen. And so, yeah, today is mainly a discussion plus Q&A about how we should be designing the due diligence, maintenance, and monitoring of real-world assets. And here are some questions that I added to start us off, and I'll be annotating the question board. So if you have any questions, put them up in chat, and I'll happily add them to the board. But I know that we have members of strategic finance, including Rue here today, and Rue is that new hire that I mentioned. Unfortunately, the Viridian cluster who did the SPF for their proof of performance, they are not here today. Unfortunately, I tried to get them on, but unfortunately they had a conflict in the schedule. So yeah, doesn't have to be like a super deep conversation, but regardless, you know, we're all in RFC phase for these proposals, and I think it would be really great to have some convo about this. So first off, I guess I want to start off with the question of is there a desire to design protector sub-DAOs to cross-monitor deals? Like, well, one thing I noticed with the Viridian SPF that's being posted is that they're really doing all of their own stuff for their own deals, and there's not a lot of, I guess, like third party or like outside people looking in, and I'm curious what the delegates think about that, and how we can make it not a preference but sort of like a design requirement for protector MetaDAOs as we currently are drafting the scope framework for real world assets.
I just had one thing, because I think in the slide before you mentioned like 3 things, right? You meant due diligence and monitoring and another thing, and so I think we probably need to decide what we are talking about.
Yeah, definitely. So I started off with the question about cross-monitoring deals because I think that's an important way to combat conflict of interest and also like self-dealing. If you have, if you're doing all the work for your own deals, like you know, maker might not necessarily get the best terms at the end of the day, and so it is great to have a third party kind of coming in and doing the diligence work. So yeah, happy to start there.
So this is diligence or ongoing monitoring?
It would be diligence, I guess. Yeah, diligence and conflict of interest.
So I'm guessing that, well, part of this may refer to like the post I had made. I think I'm the only one who used the term self-dealing, but basically there's no fiduciary duty in Maker. So, you know, if you're like a Maker holder or a MetaDAO or anything, you can kind of direct funds to yourself and there's no law against it. And especially if you're like a Maker holder, there's like really no one to stop you or, right now, right? There's nothing, we can't go to court over it. So we'd have to design it into the system itself to make sure that if people are doing this, it's really obvious, which it's not right now because of how, you know, complex and opaque some of these deals can get. And ideally to design it to where it's just not possible.
So Do asks, what are we doing at the moment to prevent such? I know what we were doing, at least I know like the lending oversight core unit was trying to be that, but there was drama around that. And I think also like Christian Peterson talked a lot about the self-dealing issue and Maker getting the best terms by having something like a a third party doing the terms and stuff like that, but I'm not the pro here.
And it's not just, to be clear, it's not just someone like rugging us and stealing all the money. It's like someone just pushes forward a below market rate interest loan, like a low interest rate loan for themselves or for someone they've got an investment in, and just pushing that through. Because right, it's like, who's going to say, oh, well, that's much harder to catch than someone just trying to steal all the money. Well, what is the legal, I guess the legal risk for pushing a below market rate loan through MakerDAO right now? Like, who's going to, do you have any fiduciary duty to not do that?
I mean, no matter what, it's like a proposal, right? And at the end of the day, it's the voters in governance that approve it or deny it. And so I guess it would be on them to be like, hey, you know, like we don't like these terms, so no. Despite the fact that, and here's the problem, it's like if Maker invested like, you know, $100,000 or $150,000 in setting up the deal and the terms are bad, it's like, that's kind of rough. Like, that's kind of why I asked the other question of like, who's paying for this stuff? Because who's paying for the legal development of the deals? Is it the counterparty that's applying? Is it Maker itself? And there's not a lot of clarity around that. At least it feels to me.
I have a question maybe for Ru, if he can come on. It's like, how confident are we in like RWA vault health? I mean, just in general, is there like some vaults that we are more concerned about than others? Like, how, just what's our quality of understanding there? Yeah, I meant Ru. Sorry.
Oh, Ru. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It sounded like Rune.
Hey,
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Can you hear me all right? This is Ru here.
Yeah, we could hear you well.
In terms of Vault Health, we're going through them one by one, starting with the largest of the vaults, so MIP65, HVB, and New Silver. We're still in the process of getting complete information from HVB in terms of the underlying loans and from MIP65 in terms of the specific transaction detail. The deepest dive we've done to date would be on New Silver, where we've kind of gone through from top to bottom, at least initially, on the quality of the collateral and the collateralization of our vault and at the loan level. And so far, we've seen no issues other than New Silver's recently breaking of the co-investor covenant, which requires them to keep 25% of drop holders, non-maker parties. And they're having a hard time finding additional investors, but that doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on the credit quality. So I'd say so far in our process, we haven't seen anything that we need to flag as credit issues, but we are still going through one by one, and we'll give an update once we've completed going through all of the real world asset deals.
And that means that you are like actually looking at their books, right? Or like, how, sorry, I'm just trying to understand how the process works.
Yes, for something like 𝘂𝘀, we're in the process of getting access to all of the underlying loan documents. So not just seeing the high level details, but the suite of 16 different documents that make up the transaction. So on a sample basis, we're able to go through and ensure that these deals are what they say they are and spot check the value of the collateral. So that's going to be an ongoing process where we do a handful each month and ask specific questions and raise any red flags that we see on the collateral to the 𝘂𝘀 team. So that's kind of the level of due diligence we can do. Of course, we can't look at every single loan. There's just too many for a team of our size to do. But through a sampling, I think we can get a picture of the health of that deal.
Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Maybe we could talk about some of the other monitoring we're doing currently and kind of how that goes. Like, I think it's really good to hear that for the 𝘂𝘀 deal. We also have, big ones with Monetalis, other ones with centrifuge drop. Yeah, if anyone wanted to hop on the mic and kind of share how we're doing those things, that might be cool.
So I guess it would be like, what does the end report look like from Ru's work, or is there kind of this idea for a transparency dashboard and monitoring dashboard for real assets deals? Is that kind of what you mean, Peyton?
Yeah, so especially if we want to talk about like what monitoring should look like in the next paradigm, I think it's probably helpful to get a good picture of what it looks like now. Obviously, like we talked about, Seb's doing an analytics board for MIP 65, which is really cool. But I'll be the first to admit, I don't really fully understand, right? Like I know these are EFT positions and we're monitoring the price and kind of cost basis of Maker. But yeah, if there's more we're doing there to check compliance or what have you, I personally am not familiar with it.
Also building off of Peyton's question, like how easily can our current solution scale, right? Like how does it fit towards future deals?
Hey, just a comment here. To be fair, in the real world, introductions of speculative vehicles like collateral debt obligation CDOs, CDO squares were super opaque. So we do have a chance here to make a difference, right, as far as monitoring. And it's still early, so we shouldn't be too harsh on the ecosystem of RWAs that's being built through DeFi. I think that the real world has done an awful job of it. I mean, there's tons of data out there that will show you that some of these vehicles, and I would think they meant good, but they just were so opaque that not even the federal chairman back then was able to understand them. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. To be fair to RWAs coming on chain, I think we could build a better future, a hell of a lot more visuality into what's happening. So I have a lot of hope. So let's be easy on these RWA providers.
And then I think what Frank and I just had and Paper had a really good chat with Asad Khan from Centrifuge, and I was really impressed by just their standard of reporting and all the documents that go into the dealer and NFT and all the metrics are on chain. And I think that's just something that I would love to strive towards. And that was also my question towards Nick, is like if Maker oracles are thinking about supporting like real world data feeds in a way in the future.
So that's definitely something that we've talked a lot about in the past. And the reason why we never really went ahead with it was because there was no real template for any of these real world assets. Every single one was bespoke and unique, right? And the kinds of data and everything was going to be completely different between any of these. And we didn't really see that as something that could scale particularly well. And so we kept hoping that on the real world asset side, there would be some standardization, right? And it always seemed promising. Like it seemed like, you know, with the success stuff, oh, we finally have like a, you know, model, right? And we're going to replicate this for a bunch of deals, or even for the centrifuge stuff, right? Like all the centrifuge assets are going to be uniform in this way, right? And that never happened. And so we're still kind of at this point where like, yeah, sure, like if the DAO wanted this, we could do it. But I think for what you're paying us to do, it would kind of be a waste of our time until there is a little more standardization, and we can just like make like a recipe for how you build one of these, and then just then once you've built it once, right, then you can just deploy it as many times as you want for as many deals as you want. And I mean, I'll admit I'm not the closest to real world assets as many of the people on this call, but from the impression that I have, there was still very little standardization to any of these deals.
Yeah, I think I really like that, because I think maybe in the future we need to choose RWA collateral by the ability that we can monitor it easily, right? Because I think with crypto collateral we're pretty choosy, and I think we should probably apply the same discretion in the real world and say like, we're only going to accept collateral where we can have at least 2 independent press feeds by tier A accountants that are available via APIs or something, right? Like, because these kind of collaterals exist. And so I think going forward, I'd love to see a discussion about monitoring before we actually even onboard the collateral, because with the exposure we have now, we are getting into a territory that can become quite uncomfortable. I mean, God forbid, but I think that the size is there.
Mm-hmm.
So one question I see in the chat from 𝘰𝘳𝘦 is, with all these difficulties, why not just limit real-world assets to US Treasuries and earn your 4% and have it be very straightforward? And as Du points out, I think the counterpoint is that there might be better yields elsewhere. You know, we can make more money if we put in the work. And also, there's the additional point of Maker being supportive of a clean money vision, where eventually I think there's more strategic financing that Maker could do to help the world become a better place. Like I know Rune is really excited about new gen nuclear reactors, right? So yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity beyond just the treasuries.
You know, but a lot of the deals I'm seeing, they're not really paying much better than 4%, or they're even paying like less than treasuries. Like I think the block tower was at 4%, which is below the 4.26 or 4.5 that treasuries are paying. So like, yeah, if someone came forward and say they have a deal for like 8 or 9% and it's fairly safe, that's better than treasuries. But if they're offering, you know, 3% or 4%, it doesn't feel like it's any better.
I think that's a mischaracterization of, you know, block tower and RWA deals in general. The duration of the deal is, you know, a critical differentiator in what the net yield is going to be. And we're seeing an inverted yield curve right now where short-term yields are higher than longer-term yields. And if you lock in a longer-term rate at a higher duration, when the yield curve's inverted, that could be worthwhile, especially if yields go down more than expected. So
that's a lot of risk, because yields could go up or stay the same, and then you're locked into this deal that is declining in value every year if we have to sell it, right? Because Maker has to be able to liquidate these on a dime if, you know, people start pulling all their USDC out.
Well, I would hesitate to say that we have to liquidate the RWAs at a dime. You know, we have a ton of on-chain stablecoin collateral that's backing DAI and reserves, and we're building, basically this asset liability model to model the effective duration of DAI demand. And if we're going to try and earn yield and try and actually make an impact on the real world, doing these sorts of flagship collateral deals, I think is important. And as Adrian mentioned in the chat, treasuries not too long ago were at 0%, short duration treasuries, and we're not going to be in this environment where we can just earn 4.5% on a 6-month duration treasury forever. It's just not going to happen. Yields are peaking probably in the next 6 months, and then the yields are going to go down after that, if you're looking at what the market is telling you.
So maybe
Yeah, and I
pushing
think-
go ahead, Mark, sorry.
So, another good point that Do is making in the chat is, typically, with RWA deals, you're getting better yields and high interest rate environments, which is, kind of inversely correlated to crypto lending demand. So like we're seeing right now, almost the majority of our revenue is coming from real world assets, and soon it's going to be the vast majority. On the flip side, when crypto markets turn bullish and rates go down close to zero again, I suspect the opposite situation is going to happen, where RWA is going to be much less profitable, and the crypto lending book will likely get much more bullish and make up the majority of our income again. At least that's what we hope.
If that happens, then yeah, it's great, but that might not. Interest rates could just keep going up, and then if you're locked into some long-term low interest deal, you're in the opposite scenario where people start, we don't know. We've only been doing this USD PSM for a few years. There's not enough evidence to say, oh, over the next 5 years, it'll be there. There's no way everyone's just going to pull all their USDC out. Like there's not enough time that we haven't been doing this for that long. So I don't know how you can be confident that we're not going to see a run on DAI that results in everyone pulling their USDC out of the PSM. And we encounter a scenario where we either have to liquidate these long-term deals or DAI depegs.
Well, what I'm saying, to be clear, is that we have a tremendous amount of on-chain stablecoin reserves that are going to be essentially liquidated way before we're dipping into the RWA book. If we're dipping into the RWA illiquid book, past the treasuries and into these, less liquid, longer term stuff, DAI's in a lot of trouble here. Maker's in a shitload of trouble here. So
yeah, that's crypto. Every few years, we're in a lot of trouble. That's I don't know, if you look at the history of MakerDAO, or in crypto in general, there's always some big issue every year or two. Some contagion effect.
Yeah, I've been in crypto 10 years, and your point is well taken. But we've basically had two black swannish type events in the past 6 months, and there's still 5.8 billion DAI outstanding. So we'd basically need for probably Binance and Coinbase to become insolvent, or frauds, for DAI demand. You're basically saying DAI demand is going to go sub 200 million. That's kind of what you're suggesting.
It doesn't have to go anywhere near that far. We've got way more, but there's what, 2.3 million USDC. So that would basically have to be the amount that gets pulled out, or less if we're putting a billion.
Not true. It's 2.3 billion USDC,
yes.
500 million GUSD,
yes,
500 million USDP. We've got another 400 million in the GUNI vaults. We've got 500 million in treasuries. We're already up to 4.2 billion just there.
Yeah.
I do see a hand from...
Yeah, paid me too. Yeah, Kianga, you have your hand up. Feel free to jump in.
Hi, yeah. Hey, everyone. Kianga Darvington, Acre Invest recognized delegate. Just also want to comment about the wider world 100% moving to tokenized assets. So like all of the value in the world, in my view, is eventually, I don't know if I'll be alive to see it, but how long it will take. But, you know, securities will be tokenized, you know, deposits in banks will be tokenized. You know, what JP Morgan and their Onyx group are up to is really interesting. So I see part of what's being done here with real world assets in terms of, you know, to answer the question, well, why not just treasuries and call it a day, is the innovation to build the rails and do the learning to capture and participate in that future state, which is going to be, if we can get there, really exciting. And if, you know, protocols like Maker can compete with the TradFi firms that are coming up to speed really quickly and have a lot of advantages to capture and offer similar financial services. So I do think it's really important to do more than just think about whatever yield we could get in a particular environment, but to be going across asset classes that today are not on chain, but in the future certainly will be. And then that'll be like a great time when there's secondary market liquidity on, you know, a lot of stuff that we don't have today. And that sort of post regulatory frameworks, I know that's like maybe a area no one wants me to get into, so I'll stop there. Thanks.
Appreciate it, Qianga.
What kind of reporting or monitoring requirements do you see, Qianga, for RWA to be attractive to, for instance, like tokenized real world assets to be attractive to institutional investors?
Well, I think the reporting requirements, I mean, that's going to be interesting. It was kind of a comment that I have. I don't know if we've got to this on the agenda in terms of what strategic finance is going to be working on in terms of reporting. What do regulators say, right? I mean, sort of what are the standard disclosures, or like how information should look? So I don't know that I have really a great response. And it's not, so when I say institutions, I'm not even just speaking of institutional investors, but like institutions, the issuers, you know, the firms that are securitizing things, the banks, that they are going to create token, and have already, like, you know, I'll put a link there. I'll try and find it while we're on this call, this really interesting report on, you know, how with JP Morgan and the group that worked on that first DeFi thing that they did on Polygon, you know, how they're framing institutional DeFi and what that looks like for them. So it's all the same people who've built financial markets these past 150 years, catching up really fast. I don't know, you know, really, really fast to, and I think what's interesting is that they've seen from what I've seen, it seems like they've figured out that a public infrastructure, you know, they kind of moved on past enterprise, not the whole TradFi industry, obviously, but JP Morgan certainly seems to have figured this out, that enterprise siloed, that's all never going to be interesting or work. But, you know, so I think that the reporting that's being built out here could really be a huge advantage for MakerDAO and DeFi to kind of compete. And again, also another talking point, I don't think we have the right talking points in the space to rebut what's going on, and to sort of battle arguments against what we're doing. But if we can speak, if we can be more articulate in the language of traditional industry And in show and reporting is a perfect area where we can show, well, you know, like to Frank's comment earlier, like you all have no idea what's going on in your books. Like here's what we can show you real time, the transparency underlying these assets or these deals. And so I think it's an incredibly important area to keep focusing on. And it's ultimately all about trust, right? And if people can see the information and make it legible, and it's not just about being on chain, right? Because it's the interpretation and it's having a meaningful view of all of the pieces, right? Not just like proof of reserves, but proof of solvency and all of those things.
Yeah, I think taking stuff like accepted accounting practices from the real world and using that as a guideline seems very reasonable. So I think that's a really good push.
So, well, noting the time here, we do have about 20 minutes that we typically use for this discussion. I figure we've talked a lot about how the state currently is and maybe some considerations. Curious if anyone has any in-game reflections on ways we can kind of use the system to our advantage in terms of having more like separate independent actors and clearly defined roles, especially as it relates to doing this monitoring.
Yeah, actually, Payne, I wanted to make a comment on that second question about what should maker pay for and what should the counterparty pay for when it comes to clustering. I think this is related to the Viridian cluster, MIP 55. It's a big ask, right? Big number. And the way I understand it is that not only is that money going to be used for some legal research, right, that needs to be done, but also they're looking to onboard individuals from the real world, right, from RWAs, people with experience, as Qianga pointed, maybe from Chase, maybe from some of the other competitors to JP Morgan Chase, to come to this side of the world and help out with this cluster Viridian. So that's the way I understand it. And I think, you know, initially, yeah, I was a bit, you know, kind of price shock, right? 500 million DAI. And now that I kind of dissected it a lot better, I do think that it is important that we do kind of bootstrap some of these clusters if we have to help them kind of get into what you just asked, which is the end game and how this transition for RWAs is going to occur with the councils and the RWA frameworks and things of that nature. So just wanted to point that out, that that I think that we should be supporting some of these clusters that are already put out on the forum their intention to be a cluster as part of the end game in the next 6 months to 12 months. So yeah.
Thanks, Frank. Some folks pointing on the chat was a 500,000 DAI request, so a little order of magnitude smaller, but your point still stands in terms of paying and how much we normally expect to front the bill for core units and likewise.
Yeah, I think one big emphasis that Rune's endgame makes is that on enforcement and kind of yeah, like careful checks and balances between like parties in the endgame ecosystem. And I am really curious how basically there will be checks on protector meta DAOs or sub DAOs. So far, I haven't really seen too much on that. Not a question, just a statement.
Yeah,
I guess the key thing is independent and verifiable, right?
I mean, with RWAs, I think that the biggest issue is this first mile, right? It's like what Drew said, he's poring over the books and really looking at these loans and sampling, like then taking out samples and, oh, okay, let's look at that loan. Is it healthy or not? Let's look at that loan. And that's the kind of thing you need, right? It's like you need the boots on the ground, and that's cost in the end. So I think we have to develop a monitoring framework that also gives us the possibility to gauge what the cost is of actually monitoring the collateral, because then we can say, is it worth it? Because if just having adequate monitoring costs us more, or half, or I don't know, some number of the yield that we're getting, then there's really no point in onboarding the collateral. And this is what I mean by becoming really choosy. It's like it has to make sense as a whole package in a way. And I think I'm really looking forward to this discussion, because I think we have all the talent here, we have all the possibilities to develop it, but this discussion has to, or it will be really interesting just to have this discussion and advance the vetting process of collateral in a way. So I think like my big question there is like, how do you see that happening? Like, how can we make sure to get that data from collaterals, or should we just become more choosy and just choose collaterals where there's easy access to like vetted data?
I would, from my perspective, I think number one is probably build in monitoring and data requirements as part of like eligible real world asset deals that Maker would consider, and probably build that into the draft and eventually formalized real world asset scope framework, right?
And obviously a lot changes in the context of meta-DAOs or sub-DAOs, and how they'll be doing their own kind of monitoring and deal acquisition. It strikes me too, it's come up a few times here, that like some of the difficulty is just in how many different types of reward assets arrangements there can be, right? We talked about several here, but I'm thinking of others that have been approved, like make-share pathway, right? That's another example of one that probably bridges the gap between on-chain and real-world asset. Yeah, success being another good example, though I think that is very firmly in the real-world assets camp. But obviously the monitoring, how they do their structures is far different than treasury bonds. Maybe it might be good to hear from the Makershire team, and I'm kind of curious if you've thought about that approved 10 million proposal, and kind of how you might be approaching it with the context of in-game and meta-DAOs in mind.
Just like high level?
Yeah, I mean, like, is this still something we're looking to pursue? Like, is it being put on hold till later? Like, yeah, in the context, yeah.
Yeah, so we are basically putting it on hold and kind of deprioritizing it, as yields in DeFi, as I'm sure everyone knows, have tanked, you know, to like somewhat to like sub 1%. A lot of the allocations that we were looking to make, and before that they were, you know, between like, you know, low teens and mid to high single digits for a lot of extremely low risk strategies. And frankly, given the you know, rising interest rates in TradFi, we've, you know, been focusing on that from the SF perspective. And I know, you know, the engineering team has a ton that they're working on with, you know, L2's teleport, and, you know, just and while I'd like to for sure provide liquidity on L2s for DAI and support that, and still think it's a worthwhile endeavor, I think it's not the highest priority, given where we are in the you know, market cycle, and with the limited engineering resources we have.
Makes sense. The reason I kind of ask is because it does seem like it could be a potential like opportunity, or at least something that a lot of meta-DAOs might see themselves partaking in, right? Like deploying capital. And even if it is only in DAI, there's still all these like custody risks, platform, all these things to consider. So that might be another aspect of this kind of like real world asset monitoring is like, well, how much of our crypto, especially if it's in more complex strategies, might kind of qualify for that list of monitoring concerns.
Yeah, I mean, we would definitely love to have the balance sheet solely managed on chain. It's just much easier, much more transparent. At the same time, it's kind of been discussed, Centrifuge is doing a lot of work on, making on-chain real-world asset transactions monitorable and reportable. And, we're kind of working with them to figure out, okay, like how can we provide the next level of transparency compared to TradFi? And, we're at the very beginning of that process. I mean, Rue just came on board, within the past, month or so. And, I'm pretty new to world assets generally, even though I was part of the original World Finance Core unit. So it's going to take time to build expertise and actually, create some processes and kind of templates for like what information is, critical to be on chain, because there's an inordinate amount of information in these documents, right? It's not, so simple that you can just put like everything on chain. Otherwise, it's just going to be as useless as, TradFi is. We want to bring the real important, parameters and kind of metrics to the surface, and have those be on chain so we can, monitor them effectively. But yeah, it's definitely a very big project, and yeah, we'd love to do some like grants or, have people on the team 100% dedicated to that, just because it's a huge thing. But yeah, it's still extremely early in this space, like relative to, crypto native collaterals and assets.
Awesome. Appreciate the perspective there. And I think this kind of highlights just kind of how much work there is to do with the in-game transition and working on scopes, right? Because these are questions we haven't necessarily figured out in the current paradigm, and we're looking to set up a new one that addresses them better. So it's been really great to get all this input from different people engaging on the call. I always love calls like that. And we just kind of encourage people to keep that momentum going, bring it to the forums, and start applying the questions we've been asking today to the in-game context. So with that in mind, we are wrapping up on time. If people have last comments, questions, concerns, now would be a good time to voice them.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
And a happy new year.
Yeah, really appreciate everyone who's been a part of our wonderful community this past year. I know it's been a wild ride, and looking at the market, that's probably not going to be over anytime soon. So thank you for joining us. If you happen to be around next week, we'll see. We might do a kind of an informal holiday thing. Hit us up in the Discord. We can maybe have some fun and talk maker memories. But that's going to be all for the official 2022 GNR calendar. Just wanted to say thanks so much to everyone who helped make this happen. Yeah, if I start listing names, I won't stop. So you know who you are. Thanks for contributing to this awesome community. And we look forward to seeing you guys again in 2023. We're targeting that first Thursday of January to be back for calls. So yeah, thanks so much. Pleasure to have you all in the community, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you, Peyton. And thank you, everybody.
Have a good one. Bye.